Hey everyone, this is Bathymetrics, and today I just want to talk briefly about sample management tools or sample librarians. I have a moderate-sized sample library. Currently I have about 136,000 samples, and they're spread across quite a few directories, and this is a common thing that I think a lot of us producers face. This is an external drive. This is my G drive. And I have my manually curated sample library here that's categorized in various ways that make sense to me, right? But then I also have a lot of native instruments content, and especially a lot of expansions, which have their own sample folders inside them. But I can't really mess with the structure of all my native instruments content, or I'll just break everything that I use that's native instruments, right? So I have a ton of these expansions, and they all have samples I want to be able to get at, but they're in very different folders in a very different place than my main personal manually curated sample library, right? And then there's some other things. For example, I used Splice for a while. So Splice likes to put all its stuff in its own folder structure, and you end up with something that looks like this. And, you know, over time, it can just get really, really difficult and cumbersome and tedious to leverage and make use of your sample libraries. And that's a problem because that slows down production and it makes you avoid your sample libraries. Now, there are a few different sample managers out there. There's a new, well, it's been around for about a year. There's one called Sononym. And this is actually the main subject of this video. I really want to talk about Sononym. There's also ADSR Sample Manager. I'm sure every one of you are aware of this because they blitz us like crazy with advertisements for this, and it's a good sample manager for this style of sample manager. There's also Loop Cloud, which to me is just a horrible mess, especially with their newest 5.0 version. I feel like they stepped way backwards in usability, and it's mostly positioned to try and sell you their sample packs, which is cool. I mean, they're giving this to you for free, but here's the big problem that I have with both ADSR Sample Manager and with Loop Cloud. ADSR Sample Manager is the best example of it. You know, you come in here and you set up your libraries and you import all the different folders you need to import, and it builds one big library database file, and that's great. And the library database is in ADSR Sample Manager anyway, it's organizing everything by tags, and you go, wow, this is great. Look at all these great tags. It's automatically finding for me, and I can come over here and say, show me everything that's a Guiro. And hello, are you not even going to work now? I have to get rid of that search term. Okay, so I can come over here to Guiro, and here's everything that is supposedly a Guiro, but there's a trick to this, right? They're only making their sample tags, their library tags, are based on strings that are found in the file name. Right? Every one of these has Guiro somewhere in the file name. This one, everyone has Gong somewhere in the file name, and so on. So if the files aren't named well, this tagging is going to be worthless to you. And everything else about the interface is great. They've got some really great features. I especially like being able to just choose a random sample out of a given list that you come up with. But let's say I search for a whoosh, right? I've got maybe, I'm guessing 50 results here total. And again, it's only files that literally have the string whoosh somewhere in the file name. Another good example might be kicks, right? If I search for the word kicks with a plural S, it's literally only finding every file that has kick with an S after it. It's not finding anything that just says kick, right? And so your search terms are really important here, and even then you're only limited to what is said in the file name. But if you look at a folder structure for, you know, we'll look at my manually curated sample drive for a minute here. So, when I grabbed a bunch of drum packs at one point and put things together, let's see if this is an example. No, these all say kick in the name. There's going to be some, yeah, here we go. Well, these are drum fills, so that's not a good example either. Actually, the best way I can show you is to use Sononym, and we will search for right now this is looking at everything I have spread across whatever. I'll show you this in a minute. But if I search for the keyword kick here, and it's going to find everything that has the word kick in it, even if the file name itself does not have the word kick in it. And this is really, really important. Like all this native instrument content for different expansions, like this is the Arcane Attic expansion, and in their drums folder, in their kick folder, right, they have all these files that are kicks, but they're not named with the actual word kick in the file name. So this is a kick. Right? They've designed these to be kicks, but the kick word itself, the string kick, is not in the file name. It's somewhere in the folder name. And so literally out of all the available sample managers, this one has the same exact problem. If I search for whoosh or kick or whatever, it's only going to, Loop Cloud is only going to look for files that have the word whoosh or kick or whatever somewhere in the file name, and they're ignoring the folder names. So right off the bat, even if you like other features of Loop Cloud or ADSR Sample Manager, they're just super limited in helping you dig through a diverse, typical kind of sample library structure and actually find relevant things, okay? So this brings us to Sononym, which I imagine many of you have never heard of. And I only heard about it by accident, through hearsay, through other producers and some of the groups I'm in mentioning it. And I'm like, what's Sononym? Okay, let's go check that out. Now, for drum samples in particular, I still very much prefer XO. Let's see, do I have a standalone version of XO? Yeah. You've seen me do if you look through my producer tutorials playlist, you'll find where I have an hour-long deep dive about XO. I love it so much. It's my favorite drum machine. And, it's specifically about kicks. I'm sorry, specifically about drums. This is a drum-oriented kind of sample librarian, and it has some things in common with Sononym that we'll talk about in a minute. But, for anything outside of drums, I need a good sample manager. And right off the bat, Sononym brings a kind of value that the other sample managers don't, and that it's smart enough to, when you search for terms, it's going to be looking for those keywords up here in a folder name and not just in the actual file name. And even better, it's smart enough to search for plural forms of the name. Let's see if I can find some folders that say kicks plural instead of kick. Yeah, there we go. Here's a bunch of files that are in a folder that has the word kicks plural, not just kick, right? So Sononym right off the bat is much smarter about its just raw search capability. Now, there are other examples. It's got this whole set of category filters that are really smart, because what Sononym does that's very, very different, there's two features it has that are very different than every other sample manager out there. One is that when it analyzes all your folders and libraries, it performs a deep, deep, deep kind of analysis where it's recording and measuring in a kind of machine learning way categories like the brightness, how harmonious the sound is, like is it dissonant or consonant? Does it have a lot of noise? And there are other factors it measures, such as spectrum, timbre, pitch, amplitude, and we'll talk about this in a minute. And I don't really want to talk about the similarity search just yet, but the point is it measures all sorts of things about every sample. And by the way, just to show you, it does have where is the theme? Oh, it's under preferences. If you don't like dark looking interfaces, it does have a light interface that looks like this, right? I personally don't like that. I'm a big fan of dark windows so that my face isn't completely destroyed every time I'm working for long sessions. Okay, so it has this smart kind of categorization where it automatically determines for you while it's analyzing your library, are these one-shots or is this sample a loop? It figures it out for you automatically. It doesn't really look at keywords. It actually listens to the sample and decides. So again, if I scroll through this results list, I'm sure to find something eventually that doesn't mention the word loop anywhere in it, like here. This construction kit one. The word loop does not appear anywhere in here, but this sample is long enough that it's obviously a loop, right? So Sononym is smart enough to figure that out and automatically categorize your loops and one-shots without relying on a sample name. And that's a very quiet loop, so that's why you're not probably hearing anything. It also categorizes tonal things. Here, let's look at the list of categories. It categorizes one-shots by percussion styles, like types of percussion noises. It also analyzes by tonal types of sounds, like bass and low keys, blips and high keys, leads and mid-high keys, right? Pads, stabs, orchestra hits, triangles, bells, voice, a cappella, right? It understands the difference between tonal samples and percussion samples and sound effects or Foley samples. Let's bring that back. You know, and it knows the difference between like a break and a smash versus a crack and a rustle versus an explosion and shot, or nature sounds and atmospheric sounds, noise, sweeps, lasers, whooshes, whips, etc. It knows this. The designer has built really, really strong analytic kind of comparison and intelligence into this, and it's accurate. So for example, we're looking at my entire library of 136,000 samples. And if I click the whooshes and whips categories to filter that entire library down to things that are whooshes and whips, let's see what they sound like. Yeah, that's a whoosh. That's kind of a whip sound. That's quiet. There's a whoosh. There's a snare, but it has a whooshy quality to it. A Foley that's a whoosh, right? So it's accurate. If I go over here and say, let's listen to nature and atmospheric stuff, right? Okay, now granted, that is a noise riser, but it also sounds kind of like a nature type sound. A lot of white noise will sound like surf, waves crashing, things like that. Right? This crowd sound, this general crowd sound, it's categorizing it as atmospheric, right? Some of these are really long. Right? That sounds like thunder in the distance. So the point is, it's good at its categorization. It's really good at its categorization. Let's go look at some tonal ones like blips and high keys. Yep, sure enough. Oops, let's go back up here. My focus was in the wrong place. Okay, so what I really want to impress you with is I didn't do any manual tagging. I haven't done any manual sorting. These folder names and file names, this says reverse. It doesn't say blip or high key, but it's a blippy high key sound, right? It's wonderful. It's brilliant. It does the categorization for you. And as I add new files to my entire sample library and it picks up the latest changes, it's going to do this kind of categorization on them. So look, this one's great. Bass and low keys, right? So here's all my basses in one place. Doesn't matter where they're scattered across all my folders and directories. Okay, where in this file name or folder path does it say bass? Nowhere. None of those other sample managers would have found this and presented this to me when I'm looking for an interesting bass sound, right? Just wouldn't have done it. Same one here. That's clearly a bass sound. The only keyword in here is this BA in the file name. But what about, well, this one has bass one shots in it. Let's go find something that doesn't have bass anywhere in the folder path. All right, one shots, chord G nickel plated. All right, granted, that is a chord, but it has a bassy quality to it. Let's look at this one. Oh, that's terrible. That's my dubious stuff. Don't want to play that because I don't know if I have sample clearance for that. Looking for ones that don't have. Okay, here's a kick from a kick library, but that's also really a good bassy sound, especially if you start it after the transient somewhere, right? You could totally use that as a growl on a downbeat and not treat it as a kick. But all those other sample managers would have only presented this to me if I searched for the keyword kick. They wouldn't show it to me if I searched for the keyword bass. So already I think this alone should demonstrate the extreme value of this very moderately priced sample manager librarian. It does the categorization for you. And this is only one type of filter that are these broad categories. You can also categorize things by, notes, notes, tempo, brightness, how harmonious or dissonant the sounds are, how noisy the sounds are. There's lots of filters you can apply just besides raw categories. And here's the other killer, absolutely amazing, wonderful feature of Sononym. And this is actually its main claim to fame, is this trick. Let's say I find an interesting sounding bass I like. Yeah, this one. So let's say I like this. And I wonder to myself, I've got 136,000 samples. I wonder if there are other basses similar to this I might like better, but that are similar to this. So see this little circular button right here? Search by similarity to this file. It's also hiding up here in the preview for the waveform itself. So regardless of where you click it from, it's now launching a similarity search. And look at this little percentage indicator down here on the bottom right. Okay, I have 136,000 samples. Now, it's not searching all of them. It's only searching the ones that are categorized as bass and low key. But look, it's already done, and it's found 10,000 samples. Well, it's basically searched through all of my bass and low key samples, whatever I currently have filtered and active. And then it's doing a similarity search. Here's my original sample up in green here. And it's also the best, most complete match because it's the same exact file. So it's at the top of my search results list. And here's what it sounds like. So that's what I'm looking for, things that sound similar to. Now check this out. I'm just going to down arrow through the results. Are you impressed yet? You should be. No other sample manager out there does this. And this type of similarity search is one of the things that I loved about XO, and it's why this is my default drum kit. It's what I use for everything related to drums, because in XO, it does a very similar kind of similarity search when you're looking for alternative drum sounds. Like, see these little dots right here? this is XO's Similarity Search, and it's doing a similar kind of analysis. So here's this bass kick. And if I go pick a different dot here, there's things in common. See how these are all very similar kicks, and they're actually occurring in a very small radius around the original kick, which was here, right? And it's searching in a very small radius because this space cloud is organizing all the sounds in a very musical timbral manner. So all the kicks that sound similar to each other are clustered together in the cloud. These are going to be brighter kicks. These are going to be darker kicks. These are going to be more energetic kicks. These are going to be more thumpy kicks, and so on. And you can go look at my XO video to learn more about that. It's amazing. But the point is, Sononym brings a similar kind of analysis and similarity search to all your other types of sounds that aren't drums. And it's amazing. And you have total control over the way that it's calculating the similarity. There are all these different factors like what's the spectral balance of the sound, how similar are the timbres, what's the pitch, like if I really want to find sounds that are in the same key as my original because I don't want to have to stretch or pitch change some alternative sound too far and warp it beyond where it can be warped. You can search by amplitude, and amplitude here means kind of like the transient shapes, like especially if you're looking at percussion loops or top loops, hi-hat loops, drum loops, the very rhythmic transient feel of a clip. This will affect, like look for other clips that have very similar patterns to them, very similar patterns of transients, spacing and pattern, right? So it isn't just like how loud it is, it's also the transients or onsets. So you can control these, there's sliders, and if I change a slider, it's going to recalculate the similarity search results and reorder them because I've said now all of a sudden spectrum isn't as important to me, or amplitude isn't as important, or maybe I only want to find bass samples that all have a very similar pitch. And I've made this column super wide, but you can see now that the similarity results are all, the original was an F -1, and all the closest similarities are now pretty much the same note, or maybe off by one semitone here. But if I were to take pitch and drag this down again, you'll see the results will change, and now it's grabbing some things that are a little further away, like this G-1. We're getting into some A's and so on. So the point is, this is a brilliant, extremely useful sample librarian. It has another cool feature that I haven't seen the other sample librarians give me the ability to do. You can create a collection, like my collection, right? And what I've just done is I have created a folder in my documents directory. Here's Sononym. Here's my collections. And now I have a folder called My Collection, and it's empty. Just going to move this out of the way for a minute. Now, let's say I'm looking for a certain type of sound for a project. Like I'm really trying to get some mechanical sounding, glitchy sounding, let's say snares, right? So let me remove all these filters. We're back to showing my entire library here, right, by default. Let me go find snares. And let me drill into a sample library where I have some really glitchy snares I've made. Drums, which drums, snares. All right, and let me get rid of the category filter and just show everything that's in that folder. All right, so I've got all these snares, and you'll notice when I click snare for the category, and it's both the filter criteria now, both the specific folder plus what Sononym thought was a true snare. When I have both these filters active, it only shows me about 10 samples, but I've got a bunch of things in here that I would use as a snare, and so there's a lot more of them now. So let's listen to some of these. Not so interesting. trying to find the one I want to show you. See, those are all very noisy industrial snares. Let's go with this one. Now that one. So it's a very white noise industrial kind of snare, right? I can come over to my collection and I can, drag this snare in and say, okay, I think maybe that's a good candidate snare for this next song I want to work on. And now what it's done is it's automatically put it into that collection folder. It's automatically like made a little temporary copy over in my documents folder, right? And it's just collecting them as I go. Now I can do a similarity search on this. And first, let's go ahead and, let's do the similarity search first. And then I'm going to filter to snares. And then I'm going to remove this thing that says in folder snares. So now it's basically looking for all samples that are similar to the snare that I picked. But now it's looking across my entire library, but only in the things that it's categorized as snares. And so the search is done already. There's 9,000 possible ones, and they're all ordered by similarity. So let's see how this did. Here's the original. Okay, that one's a quiet one. See how it's picking up snares that have strong similarity in terms of its noisiness, its pitch, its amplitude, its spectrum. And again, I could change some of these search results and say what I really want is I want the pitch to be kind of similar, the amplitude, but mostly I want the timbre and the spectrum to influence the results and the pitch. So let's try that again. Here's this one. Got a lot of those. But see how this is similar to the original in its overall tonal shape? Right? And then I could go in further and say, no, I want it to be really bright. I want this thing to be ridiculously bright. So I want it all the way up here. And let's take the bottom end here. And then let's also go to the noisiness and turn that one on. And let's say I want it to be a really noisy snare, right? So now it's changed the similarity results again. It's all done. Let's try it again. So that's got some qualities that might be good. Let's remove the brightness one and just focus on noisiness. Let's also take the pitch down. Let's take the overall down. Let's take the amplitude down and just focus mostly on that timbre and that spectrum. And let's make the spectrum really important. Okay, again. There, that's much closer now. And it's still searching. Okay, it's done now. Hey. So see how we're getting that similar kind of timbral shape with a lot of extra white noisy type aspects to the sound. So, let's say I decide I like this one. I can, let's switch back to collections. I can be pulling that one as I go. I can keep going down. Okay, let's do that one. I can use a shortcut to pop it over into the collections. Let's try that one, right? And so I can build this collection as I go. as I'm, playing with similarity results, playing with other filters, trying to narrow down, all the potentially good ones. And it's just building this nice little folder as I go of things that I can later my project could just come over here and I could, look around inside these samples as I'm working on the project and I'm trying different snares. Like I could drop all these snares into a multi-sample and build a multi-sample of just these very closely related snares and then try them out, in various ways in my project as I go. So I think that's enough to tease you about the usefulness of Sononym. If you're interested in checking this out, they have a 30-day fully functional demo, like absolutely no limitations to it. You can download it at their site. It's sononym.net. And the only other tip I'll give you is pay attention to their blog and especially come down and look at this section on understanding similarity search a little better, because at first it can be confusing how to make it do what you want. So there's some really good tips in here. And definitely look at this article on how to use symlinks with Sononym, because it's the symlink trick that can make Sononym very fast, very responsive, and also allow you to have a view of your library that, everything's in one place, even though these folders are all split across a bunch of different drives. These have all been created by me creating some symlinks to certain folders. And then this whole thing is a symlink to my sample lib. And it's like everything here is literally in one place on my C drive. Where did I put it? It's my main SSD. And yeah, see, I have this Bafo Sononym lib. These are basically like virtual links to the actual content that's over on my D drive. Like here's my splice library. And you can see I had that little shortcut symbol, and it's like I'm on my G drive actually looking through my splice library, but I'm on the C drive using these symlinks. So this concept of symlinks may be new to some of you. Here's my native instruments content, and here's symlinks to each one of those native instrument folders, and specifically to the sample folder that's way down deep inside each of those. So by setting up this symlink structure first, and then basically telling Sononym, grab this folder and scan it to make your library, right? I have all my stuff in one convenient place on my fastest SSD drive. And so Sononym is building its database in just this one folder. You can see here are the database files for Sononym. And it makes Sononym very responsive. And I can still browse these as if I were, if I want to see what's inside Astral Flutter, right? I can just click this and remove all the other filters, except for like this one. What are the loops that I have in Astral Flutter? And there we go. So it makes the browsing and usage and responsiveness of Sononym work really, really well if you use symlinks. So when you're testing it out, highly recommend you read this first and think about how to set up your structure in a way that will help Sononym perform at its best. So there you go. Hope this has been useful, and I'll see you next time.